What if a single sound could remember everything we tried to forget? In a small West Virginia town, 4 children vanished after the church bells rang 4 times and stopped. Now, 30 years later, the ground hums again, whispering their names. Would you dare to listen? If you've ever heard something you can't explain, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're watching from, because maybe, just maybe, your town has its own echo too. Ashford Hollow, West Virginia, always felt like a place that time forgot. The mountains pressed in close, the trees whispered secrets in the wind, and the nights stretched longer than they should. Folks there didn't talk much about what lay beneath their feet, the old salt mine that closed in '49, or why no one went near the Carter farm after dark. On the 21st of June 1995, the summer heat was thick as syrup. Sheriff Henry Monroe sat at his desk, shirt damp, reading a letter his daughter Rachel had written at camp. She'd drawn a little bell in the corner, 4 rings drawn next to it. For luck, she'd written. He smiled, then heard the static crackle over the police radio. At 9:17 p.m., the power flickered across town, once, twice, 3 times, then darkness. The dispatcher's voice came through the radio, broken and panicked. 911 call just came in. Carter Farm, female voice said. Someone's here. Then the line died. Henry grabbed his flashlight, keys, and sidearm. The rain started falling just as he pulled out of the station. The road to the Carter property wound through the holler, narrow and slick with mud. The only light came from his headlights and the lightning cutting across the ridge. When he arrived, the front door hung open. The house smelled of wet wood and something faintly metallic. "Mrs. Carter?" he called out. No answer. Only the low hum of the generator outside and a distant creak from the barn. Inside, 4 small plates sat on the kitchen table, dinner untouched. A record player spun in the corner, the needle scratching over silence. Then, a sudden burst of sound, a warped children's song, half speed, half static. Henry froze. The melody was wrong. It rose and fell like someone trying to remember the tune. He moved down the hallway. The wallpaper was torn where small hands had clawed. Upstairs, the children's beds were made, toys neatly lined up, as if waiting for their owners to return. He found Mrs. Martha Carter sitting in her rocker, eyes wide, hands gripping a rosary. Her voice trembled. They went outside when the lights flickered, said they heard bells down by the well. "I told them not to go, Sheriff. I told them." Henry ran out to the field. The rain was heavier now, soaking through his uniform. The old well sat in the middle of the pasture, the lid half open, the rope broken. Around it, 4 small sets of footprints circled in the mud and then stopped. No drag marks. No sign of struggle. Just nothing. A small copper bell lay cracked beside the well, mud clinging to its surface. Henry picked it up, and for a moment he thought he heard something tiny voices, whispering beneath the rain. By morning, the entire town had gathered. Search dogs, volunteers, even a news van from Charleston. They searched every acre of Ashford Hollow woods, creek, mine entrances. Nothing. Days turned to weeks. The river swelled, washing away what little evidence they'd found. Rumors filled the silence. That the Carter kids had been taken by a drifter, that Reed Whitlow, the old miner who lived near the ridge, had something to do with it, or that maybe, just maybe, the hollow itself had taken them. Henry worked himself to exhaustion. Every night he replayed the call tape static, then a faint voice, "Someone's here," followed by 4 soft chimes. 6 weeks later, the search was called off. The official report read, "Presumed abduction. Case unresolved." Henry didn't accept that. He started visiting Reed Whitlow at the edge of the woods, pressing for answers. Reed always gave the same one. "Sheriff, the ground hums when it remembers. Don't go listening too close." People stopped answering Henry's calls. The town wanted quiet again, wanted to bury the story like so many before it. But Henry couldn't sleep. The night before he died, he recorded one last tape. His voice was tired, cracking under the weight of obsession. "If anyone hears this, the hollow isn't empty. It listens. It learns the voices of those who search for truth. I think it's learning mine. A storm rolled through Ashford Hollow that night. The next morning they found him slumped over his desk, heart stopped, the cracked copper bell beside him. The town buried Henry Monroe on the hill overlooking the creek. People came, said kind words, then went home and shut their doors before dark. No one mentioned the children again. Years passed. Rachel grew up, joined the academy, and eventually took her father's badge, the same one still scratched with his initials. She told herself she wouldn't become him, wouldn't drown in old ghosts. But ghosts have a way of waiting. 29 summers later, the drought came. The Ashford Creek shrank to a trickle, exposing things long hidden. One morning, a farmer found his dog barking at something lodged in the riverbank, a wooden box, swollen and dark from decades underground. He pried it open with a shovel. Inside, wrapped in rotted cloth, was a water-stained notebook. On the first page, written in a shaky child's hand, were 4 words that made his blood run cold. "We're still here." He took a step back, unsure if it was a message or a warning. Then he noticed the tiny copper bell tangled in the mud beside the box, broken clean in half. When he picked it up, it gave a faint sound, not a ring, but a sigh like the hollow exhaling after 30 years of silence. And somewhere far down the valley, the church bells of Ashford Hollow began to ring again. Once, twice, 3 times, 4. Then they stopped. The farmer looked toward the woods, heart hammering, because he could swear that under the wind he heard the faint laughter of children echoing up from the creek bed. By the time the news spread, the whole town of Ashford Hollow was talking about the wooden box. It was late August 2024, the driest summer in 30 years. The creek that once ran loud beside Main Street had turned into a ribbon of cracked mud. Drought burned the grass yellow, and people said even the wind felt thirsty. When Deputy Rachel Monroe arrived at the sheriff's office that morning, the air was already thick with gossip. The old scanner on her desk kept buzzing with chatter from patrol units. "Copy that. Unit 3 looks like a box. Yeah, about 2 feet long. Found near the old bridge." Rachel stopped mid-step. A box near the creek. Her throat tightened before her mind caught up. She poured herself a black coffee, but her hand trembled as she set the cup down, the same way her father's hand used to shake when he hadn't slept for days. Outside, the morning fog lifted to reveal the valley, the same valley her dad had searched until it broke him. The Carter case. Nobody said it out loud anymore, but everyone still remembered. 4 kids: Matthew, June, Caleb, Lily gone without a trace in 1995. No bodies, no suspects. Just a well, a bell, and a rumor that never died. Now, 29 years later, the ground had coughed up something. At the creek site, a handful of deputies had gathered. The box sat on the tailgate of a pickup, still wrapped in damp burlap. It looked like it had been carved from local oak, heavy, swollen, black with water and age. Sheriff Conway, her superior, waved her over. "You ever see anything like this, Monroe?" She shook her head. The initials MC were faintly carved into the lid. "Could be one of the Carter kids," she whispered. "Maybe," Conway said, "but we won't jump there yet. State lab's on the way. You good?" Rachel nodded, but her stomach was tight as wire. The farmer who found the box, a broad man named Lewis Reed, stood nearby, hat in hand. His voice was low and uneasy. "Didn't look right, ma'am. The way the mud was packed around it like someone buried it on purpose. When I pried it up, I swear it sighed." Rachel studied him. "It... what?" He looked embarrassed. "Made a sound. Not a squeak, not a hiss, more like breath. I know it sounds crazy." It didn't sound crazy to her. It sounded familiar. At the lab, the forensics tech young, eager Jules Hartman took one look and said, "This thing's a time capsule." He set up gloves and masks, cutting through the burlap carefully. The smell hit first, a mix of earth, rot, and something faintly metallic. Inside was a notebook, its pages warped and brown, a rusted toy car, and a small copper bell, cracked in half. Rachel felt the air leave her chest. Hartman adjusted his glasses. "We'll need to dry these out slow. The ink might still be legible." The sheriff leaned over her shoulder. "You all right, Monroe?" She nodded, lying through her teeth. "Fine." But that night, she sat in her apartment and stared at the ceiling fan turning above her head. Her father's old recorders sat on the nightstand, still working after all these years. She pressed play. Static. Then his voice, calm, tired. "If you're hearing this, Rachel, you've already found something you shouldn't." Her heart stopped. "It's in the ground. The sound. Don't dig. Don't listen too long." The tape cut off abruptly. She sat frozen. Her father had recorded dozens of tapes in his last year, but this one she'd never heard before. Outside, thunder rumbled, but it hadn't rained in months. 2 days later, the state lab called. "Deputy Monroe, you'll want to see this yourself." Rachel drove 2 hours to Charleston. The lab smelled like disinfectant and dust. Jules met her at the door, pale-faced, holding the notebook inside a sealed sleeve. "The handwriting matches one of the Carter kids," he said quietly. "Matthew, we confirmed from school samples." Rachel felt her pulse climb. "After 29 years? Yeah, and that's not all." He opened the sleeve and pointed at the first page. The words were shaky but clear. "We're still here. Don't go near the well." A chill crawled up her arms. Jules added, "The last page looks newer. Different pen, newer paper fibers. Someone added to this years later." "What does it say?" He turned the page gently. The final entry read, "If you find this, tell Rachel." It's learning the words. That night, Rachel drove back through the mountains with her windows down, letting the cold air slap her awake. Her mind spun. Who wrote that message? How did they know her name? When she reached the edge of town, she slowed near the old Carter property. The fence was broken, the house half collapsed, moonlight spilling through what used to be the living room window. She parked and got out. The air smelled like dry hay and dust, but beneath it, faintly salt. Her flashlight beam swept across the yard. The well was still there, covered with a warped wooden lid. She hesitated, then stepped closer. Something glittered at the edge of the stones. She crouched and picked it up, a glass marble, swirled blue and white, a child's toy. She turned it over in her palm, remembering the evidence photos from her father's file. Caleb Carter had one just like it. Rachel swallowed hard, her heart thudding in her ears. She placed the marble in her pocket and started to turn away, then stopped. The wind shifted, carrying a sound she hadn't heard since she was 11. Ding, then silence. Ding. Another pause. 4 chimes, slow and deliberate, drifting through the dry air. Her breath caught. No church bells had rung in Ashford Hollow for decades. The tower collapsed years ago. She spun toward the hills, flashlight trembling, scanning the tree line, nothing but the empty dark. Still, the 4th chime hung there, soft, lingering, impossibly close, like it was coming from right beneath her boots. She stepped back from the well, pulse hammering, whispering to herself, "It's just wind, just the wind." But as she turned to leave, something else followed, the faintest echo of children's laughter rising from the dry earth. Rachel froze. The marble in her pocket grew warm against her palm, and from somewhere deep below, she thought she heard her father's voice, muffled but certain, whispering the same words he'd left on that old tape. "Don't dig." Morning came to Ashford Hollow, gray and breathless, the kind of light that made the whole town feel like it was holding its breath. Deputy Rachel Monroe hadn't slept. The marble she'd found at the Carter well sat on her kitchen table, next to her badge, gleaming faintly blue under the thin dawn. She couldn't shake the feeling that it was warmer than it should be. By 7 a.m., she was already back at the station. Sheriff Conway noticed the circles under her eyes. "Jesus, Monroe, you look like you wrestled thunder all night." "Just restless," she muttered. He handed her a manila folder. "State wants us to reopen the Carter case officially. I'm assigning you lead investigator. You've got a personal connection, use it." Rachel's throat went dry. "Personal connection? Your dad. You know the terrain. You know the people. Hell, half this county still talks about what he found or what he didn't." She nodded, quietly closing the folder. The last thing she wanted was to dig up her father's ghosts. But apparently, the ground had already done that for her. At 9:30, She drove out to the old Carter property again. The farmhouse looked even smaller in daylight, its windows black with mildew, porch eaten by vines. The once green fields around it had turned brittle gold from the drought. As she crossed the yard, she saw tire tracks fresh. Someone had been here after her. She crouched, brushing a hand across the mud. Two distinct tread patterns, one from a county vehicle, the other older, narrower, maybe a pickup. She rose slowly, hand resting on her holster. Anyone out here? No answer. Just the groan of the wind pushing through the porch boards. Rachel stepped inside the house. The smell of rot and dust hit her immediately. Light filtered through holes in the roof, slicing the darkness into ribbons. The kitchen looked frozen in time plates still stacked, spoons corroded in the sink. She turned toward the living room and stopped. Someone had cleared a patch of dust from the floorboards. Words were carved into the wood beneath, letters thin and deliberate. Listen. A shiver crawled up her spine. The floor creaked behind her. She spun, gun drawn, but saw nothing, just the slow sway of the torn curtains. Then, faintly from the hall, click, click, click. She followed the sound, each step measured. It led her to the children's bedroom. Toys still lined the shelf-faded dolls, a cracked baseball glove, a rusted toy car. The sound came from the record player in the corner, the same one her father had written about in his case notes. It was spinning again. She unplugged it. It kept spinning. The needle dropped, and a faint child's voice came through, distorted, but clear enough to turn her blood to ice. We're still here. The record slowed, warped, then stopped. Rachel backed away. The carved word on the floor echoed in her mind. Listen. She grabbed her radio. Dispatch, this is Monroe. I need a forensic team out here. Possible evidence, recovery audio device, unidentified origin. But the radio only hissed. Dispatch? Copy? The static shifted. For a moment, she thought she heard breathing. Then, her father's voice soft, broken. Rachel, stop digging. Her fingers went numb. Who is this? Identify yourself. No reply. Only a single metallic chime from somewhere outside the house. By noon, backup arrived. Jules Hartman from forensics, and two deputies she barely knew. Rachel showed them the carvings, the record player, the footprints outside. Jules crouched near the well, waving his metal detector. You know this area sits right over the old mine network, right? The original Weaver shaft runs about 30 yards below us. Rachel frowned. That mine's been sealed since the 42nds. Maybe not as sealed as we thought, Jules said, scanning the ground. The detector beeped sharply. There's a cavity here about 3 feet down. Sheriff Conway arrived soon after. We're calling in a ground-penetrating radar team from Charleston. Till then, no digging. Last thing I need is one of you dropping into a sinkhole. Rachel's pulse quickened. The same phrase again. Don't dig. She nodded, but her mind was racing. If something was buried here, something tied to the missing kids, it could explain everything. That night, she returned to the office, unable to let it go. She pulled her father's old case file from the archives. It was thick, yellowed, smelling faintly of tobacco and mold. Inside were photos of the well, of the children's shoes, of the copper bell. But what caught her eye was a map, a crude sketch of the mine system. In her father's handwriting, main shaft sealed, subtunnel unknown, possible access under Carter Well. She traced the line with her finger. It matched the same spot Jules had marked that morning. Beneath the map, folded tight, was a note she'd never seen before. The ink was faded, but legible. If you ever find the well again, don't listen for the sound. It listens back. By dawn, Rachel was back at the property. The sky glowed pale orange, cicadas humming like an uneasy heartbeat. She told herself she'd just marked the site for the radar team, nothing more. But she brought a shovel anyway. The earth was soft, easier to break than she expected. Each scoop of dirt brought up the scent of iron and clay. 3 feet down, the shovel hit wood. Her heart leapt. She cleared the soil with her hands. A rotted plank appeared, slick and black. She tapped it once. It echoed hollow. She leaned closer. her breath clouding in the cool dawn. Then she heard it so faint she almost mistook it for wind. A hum. Low, rhythmic. 4 beats, then silence. She stood abruptly, heart hammering. The sound faded as quickly as it came. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, making her jump. The screen read, "Unknown number." She answered. "This is Deputy Monroe." A man's voice came through, quiet and unfamiliar. "You shouldn't be there." "Who is this?" she snapped. He didn't answer immediately. The line crackled. Then softly, "It remembers you." The call cut off. Rachel backed away from the pit, her pulse racing. Her hand brushed against something buried at the edge. A small, corroded badge. She lifted it slowly. R. Monroe. Her father's. Her knees gave out, and she dropped to the ground, staring at the badge caked in mud. "No," she whispered. "They buried him here?" But before she could move, a shadow passed across the ground beside her, a figure standing at the edge of the trees. "Hey!" she shouted, hand reaching for her weapon. The figure didn't move. The light caught its face for half a second, pale, hollow-eyed, wearing what looked like an old deputy's uniform. Her father's. Then it was gone. She staggered backward, breathing hard, flashlight trembling. The woods were silent again. The hum had stopped. Rachel grabbed the badge and stumbled to her truck, mud clinging to her boots. She threw the shovel in the bed, slammed the door, and gunned the engine. As the headlights sliced through the trees, the radio crackled to life. "Deputy Monroe," her father's voice. "You were never supposed to find me." The headlights flickered, the radio whined with static, and for just 1 second every light in the valley went out. When they came back, the badge on her dashboard was gone. Only the faint echo of 4 soft chimes lingered through the static. Rain finally came to Ashford Hollow, but it didn't feel like mercy. It fell in thin, restless sheets that turned the dust to blood-colored mud, washing old things to the surface, roots, bones, and memories that had been buried too long. Deputy Rachel Monroe sat in her truck outside the Carter property, windshield wipers ticking a slow rhythm. She hadn't slept in 48 hours. Her father's badge, the one she swore she saw disappear, was now sitting quietly on the passenger seat. Dry, clean, polished. It looked exactly the way it did the day they buried him. She touched the metal. It was warm again. Back at the sheriff's office, Sheriff Conway was waiting, his jaw tight. "Monroe, I told you no solo field work. You dug up that site without clearance." "I found evidence," she shot back. "You found trouble," he said. "You're off the Carter case until further notice." Rachel stared at him. "You're suspending me for doing my job?" "I'm suspending you because you're starting to sound like your father," Conway said, softer now. "And we both know how that ended." She clenched her fists, fighting the urge to shout. Instead, she turned and walked out into the rain. The badge in her pocket burned against her leg like a secret. That night, she drove without thinking, headlights slicing through the storm. The town was empty. Curtains drawn, doors locked, lights flickering behind old glass. When she reached the ridge road, she slowed. Through the veil of rain, she saw a man standing by the tree line. He wore a deputy's jacket. Her heart stuttered. "Dad," she whispered. The figure didn't move. He was facing the woods, head tilted slightly as if listening to something deep in the rain. Rachel stopped the truck, stepped out, and shouted, "Sir, identify yourself." Lightning flashed, and the man was gone. She scanned the tree line, pulse pounding. Then she saw it. A faint glow deeper in the woods, flickering like a lantern swinging from a hand. She hesitated only a second before following. The woods swallowed her whole. The rain dulled to a mist. The world narrowed to the beam of her flashlight and the rhythm of her boots on wet soil. The deeper she went, the stronger the smell of salt became. Not ocean salt, this was sharper, like iron and stone. The light she'd seen flickered again, 20 yards ahead. She crept closer until she realized it wasn't a lantern at all. It was an old flashlight, propped upright on a log, still on after who knows how long. Beside it lay a raincoat, her father's initials stitched inside the collar. H.M. Rachel swallowed hard, reaching down to pick it up, Something slipped from the pocket, a cassette tape sealed in a plastic bag. The label read, "The 15th of July, 1995 Field Audio." Her hands shook as she slid the tape into her recorder. Static. Then her father's voice, weary but determined. "We sealed the well today. Avery says it's done, but I keep hearing them in the trees. Not the kids, the echoes of them. Whatever's down there learned their voices. If I don't make it home, tell Rachel. She's not hearing ghosts. She's hearing what the ground remembers." The tape clicked off. Rachel stood frozen in the rain, her father's voice still buzzing in her skull. Then, from somewhere ahead, she heard branches cracking slow, deliberate footsteps. "Who's there?" she called. No reply, only the sound of movement circling her. She swung her flashlight, catching glimpses between the trees, a sleeve, a boot, the edge of a star-shaped badge gleaming in the dark. Her breath caught. "Dad?" The light flickered again, and the figure stepped halfway into view. He looked like her father, same frame, same eyes, but his skin was pale as ash, lips bloodless. His head tilted the way she'd seen before, listening. Then he smiled too slow, too wide, and raised one finger to his lips. "Shh." Rachel stumbled backward. "You're not him." The figure cocked his head, voice soft and wrong. "You dug too deep, Rachel." Lightning tore the sky open, and he was gone again. Her radio crackled to life, loud in the silence. "Monroe, this is Avery. You copy?" She pressed it to her mouth, relief flooding in. "Paul, thank God. I found something, my father's tapes." "Slow down," Avery interrupted. His tone was sharp. "Where are you right now?" "In the woods near the Carter site." "You won't believe what Avery cut her off. "Rachel, get out of there. Now." "What? Why?" "Because Henry told me once if you ever hear his voice in the hollow, it's not him anymore." The radio went dead. Rain hammered harder now, drowning every other sound. Rachel turned toward the faint glow of her truck through the trees, heart racing. But something was following slow, steady steps in the mud. She broke into a run. Branches tore at her arms, roots caught her boots, but she didn't stop. The air buzzed with low vibrations, that same 4-beat hum she'd heard near the well. When she burst from the tree line, she slammed into someone, Avery. He grabbed her shoulders, soaked and shaking. "Jesus, you look like you've seen a ghost." She gasped. "Maybe I have." Avery's eyes flicked to the tape in her hand. "Where did you get that?" "Out here." He left it. Avery looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't. Instead, he said, "Get in the truck." They drove in silence back toward town, rain blurring the windshield, the wipers squealing in protest. Rachel clutched the tape, her mind a tangle of fear and questions. Finally, she said, "You were with him that night, weren't you?" "The night they sealed the well." Avery's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "Yeah, we thought we were stopping it. We were wrong." "What was it?" He stared straight ahead. "I don't know. Something old. Something that listens." Back at the office, Avery poured them both coffee, though neither drank. He spread the map of the mine network across the desk. Henry believed the sound, the humming, wasn't just echoes. It was coming from a lower chamber, a place that wasn't on any official record. Rachel traced the same line her father had drawn all those years ago. "Under the Carter." "Well," Avery nodded. "The military did acoustic testing down there in the 40s. They thought they could weaponize frequency. The mine collapsed. They covered it up." She met his eyes. "You think it's still active?" "I think it never stopped." The storm outside deepened, thunder rolling like something alive underground. Rachel felt the floor vibrate beneath her boots. "Do you feel that?" Avery went still. The coffee cup rattled on the desk. Then came a faint sound through the ceiling vent, soft and far away but unmistakable. Ding, 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 ding. 4 chimes. Avery's face drained of color. "That came from below us," Rachel whispered. "From the mine." The lights flickered, papers rustling as if caught in a breath from the earth itself. The same voice she'd heard in the woods whispered through the vent, gentle and patient. "You shouldn't have come back." Rachel's eyes widened. "It's in the system," she said. "Through the wiring, the vents it's traveling through sound." Avery reached for the tape recorder. "We need to find the source before it finds us." But the recorder clicked on by itself. Henry Monroe's voice played, calm and quiet. "Rachel, if you're hearing this, it means I failed. The Hollow never stops listening. It just waits for someone to speak." The tape hissed. Then, in a tone neither of them had ever heard from him, something low, not quite human, Henry whispered, "It's your turn now." The power went out. In the darkness, Rachel's hand found her flashlight. She turned it on just as a shadow passed across the beam, standing in the doorway. Not Avery. Not anyone living. The man in the trees stood there, dripping rain, smiling like he'd been waiting for her all along. The storm didn't stop. It just changed its rhythm. By midnight, Ashford Hollow was a town wrapped in rain and static. The air buzzed faintly, as if the clouds themselves were humming. Deputy Rachel Monroe sat at her desk, flashlight trembling in her hand, staring at the wet footprints that led from the door straight to where the man in the trees had been standing moments earlier. They ended in the middle of the floor and then nothing. No trail out, no exit, just gone. Across from her, Detective Paul Avery was still catching his breath. "Whatever that was," he said hoarsely, "it's not flesh and blood." Rachel swallowed. "Then what the hell is it?" He shook his head. Maybe not what, maybe where. He pulled out the mind map again, flattening it with one hand. "Your dad always said it came from below, the military chamber, the sealed corridor. If something is down there, we need to find it before it finds someone else." Rachel glanced at the dark window, where the rain streaked in diagonal lines like scratches. Her reflection looked pale and hollow. "You're saying we go underground, tonight?" Avery gave a grim nod. "Before the rain fills the shafts again." By 2 a.m., they were parked beside the Carter field, headlights slicing through the mist. The old well stood in the center like an open throat. Avery opened the tailgate, pulling out climbing gear and flashlights. "I called Dr. Whitaker. She's on her way. She thinks this whole place might be sitting on a pocket of sonic resonance." Rachel managed a wry smile. "You mean a ghost frequency?" He met her eyes. "Call it whatever you want. Just stay close." They secured the ropes and started their descent. The well walls were slick, lined with salt crust that shimmered under the beam of their lights. The deeper they went, the colder the air became, wet and metallic, carrying a faint smell of rusted copper. At 30 feet down, Rachel's boot hit something solid. "There's a ledge," she said, voice echoing oddly. She swung her light around. A wooden support beam stretched horizontally, leading into a dark tunnel that shouldn't exist. Avery climbed down beside her. "This isn't on any map. Neither was the Hollow," she murmured. They moved forward, crouching through the narrow shaft. The air vibrated faintly against their ears. It wasn't noise. Exactly, it was pressure. A low, living pulse. Avery stopped. "Do you hear that?" Rachel nodded. 4 beats. Always 4. They followed the sound until the tunnel widened into a cavern. There, rising out of the salt rock, stood a rusted metal door. The surface was engraved with an image, a cracked bell split down the center. Rachel stared, heart pounding. "It's the same symbol from the files. The bell." Avery ran his fingers across it. "Looks welded shut." He hit it once with the butt of his flashlight. The door rang 4 notes, perfectly even. The vibration shot through their bones. Rachel stumbled back, clutching her head. "Stop! It's responding." But it was too late. The door began to shudder, metal grinding against stone, opening inward with a groan that echoed through the mine like thunder. Beyond the doorway was a chamber, a dome carved from salt, glowing faintly blue. Rows of cables ran along the ceiling, trailing into a massive machine in the center. Microphones, speakers, old military consoles. "This must be it," Avery whispered. "The echo room." Rachel's light caught something hanging along the far wall, 4 small school chairs, rusted and fused to the floor. On each seat sat a broken toy, a doll, a marble, a bell, and a toy car. Her breath caught. The Carter kids. She moved closer. The air around the toys shimmered faintly, like heat on asphalt. Then she heard it, children laughing. But not in the room. Inside her ears. "We're still here." Rachel staggered back, eyes wide. "Avery, did you hear that?" But Avery wasn't looking at her. He was staring at the console, where a reel-to-reel recorder had started spinning on its own. Henry Monroe's voice filled the chamber, calm but heavy with sorrow. "This is Henry Monroe. Experiment date: July 15th, 1995. The voices have stabilized. They repeat the pattern every 4 seconds. They're not recordings. They're answers." Rachel felt her knees weaken. "He was here. He came down here." Avery nodded slowly. "And he never told anyone." The tape continued. "If anyone hears this, the hollow isn't evil. It's memory. Everything said here, every sound, stays alive. The kids, they were taken because we kept listening." The reel stopped spinning. The hum filled the silence again, deeper now, almost tender. Rachel whispered, "Dad, what did you do?" Suddenly, Avery stiffened. "Rachel, behind you." She turned. The toys on the chairs were moving slowly, rotating, scraping against the rusted metal. The hum grew louder, turning into overlapping whispers. A voice, no, many voices echoed in unison. "Tell it again." Rachel's flashlight flickered, dying. In the half-light, she saw movement shapes forming out of the salt walls, faint outlines of small bodies, hands pressed to the rock as if reaching out. Henry said it's memory. Avery shouted over the noise. "They're not ghosts, they're echoes trying to repeat what they were." Rachel screamed, "Then how do we stop it?" He pointed at the console. "Turn it off." She ran to the machine, fumbling for switches. The panel was corroded, labels unreadable. She slammed her palm down on the main breaker. The room went black. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then, from the darkness, her father's voice closer than before, whispering right behind her ear. "Don't stop the story, Rachel. If you stop, it forgets you." Her flashlight flickered back on. Avery was gone. "Paul?" she shouted, spinning around. Nothing but the empty room and the faint smell of ozone. She ran to the doorway, but the path they'd entered through had collapsed rocks sealing the exit. Panic surged through her chest. Then she noticed something on the ground. Avery's recorder, still blinking red. She picked it up and pressed play. His voice came through, trembling. "If anyone finds this, she's still down there." The hollow opened again. She froze. The timestamp read 2:47 a.m., 10 minutes in the future. Rachel dropped the recorder, heart pounding. "No, no, no." The hum built again, deep enough to rattle her teeth. The toys clattered to the floor. The microphones turned toward her, and through the rising static came one final phrase, spoken in her father's voice, but layered with others. Children, soldiers, her own. "It remembers you now." Rachel backed into the center of the chamber, the light shaking in her hand, eyes darting for an escape that didn't exist. The door behind her slammed shut. The last thing she saw before the beam died was the cracked bell glowing faintly on the metal surface. 4 bright lines pulsing in rhythm, like a heartbeat that belonged to the ground itself. Then came a single chime, low and final, echoing through every corridor of Ashford Hollow. Silence. For a long, awful moment, there was nothing else, no sound, no light, just the taste of salt and metal on Rachel Monroe's tongue. She opened her eyes. The beam of her fallen flashlight was still burning weakly, rolling across the salt floor like a trembling sundae. The chamber around her felt smaller now, as if the walls were breathing in slow, shallow waves. Rachel swallowed, her throat raw. "Paul?" No answer. Only the faint echo of her own voice. Too faint, too delayed. Like it had been replayed, not returned. She picked up her flashlight and shined it toward the console. The tape reels were moving again, spinning without a motor. On the nearest one, someone had scrawled in marker, "Property of U.S. Signal Corps, 1,949. A red light blinked twice. Then came the first sound, a man's voice, clipped and formal, soaked in static. "Project Bellwill, day 12. Resonance stable at 13.9 Hz. Audible response from chamber confirmed. Subject vocalizations continue despite termination of power." Rachel frowned. "Subject vocalizations?" Another voice, female, frightened, younger. "Sir, they're copying us. Every word we say they repeat it back." Then the man again, Urgent now. Shut it down. A metallic screech filled the room, and the tape snapped. Rachel killed the flashlight and stood perfectly still. In the dark, she could hear it again, the low hum, pulsing like the earth had a heartbeat. 4 beats. Pause. 4 beats. Her father had said it once on tape. The ground hums when it remembers. Now she understood what he meant. She crouched beside the machine, tracing the old cables with her fingers. They vanished into the salt wall, merging like roots into the rock. Something about the hum changed as she touched the wire. It rose slightly, almost like a question. She whispered, "What are you?" The hum answered, rising and falling, mimicking her voice. Then, faintly, a whisper layered within the vibration. "We are what's left." Rachel froze. Left of what? You. A shock ran through her chest. It wasn't just one voice now, it was dozens, layered, male and female, child and adult, all of them speaking together, softly, like a choir of memory. "You built this place. You made us listen. We only became what you forgot." She staggered backward. "You're not real. You're recordings." "Then stop listening." She turned and slammed her hands over her ears, but the voices didn't stop. They were inside the air, inside the walls. Rachel. Henry. Monroe. It's all the same story. The chamber lights flickered on, one by one, bathing the room in a soft white glow. There was movement behind the console figures forming from mist and salt dust. Shapes of people in uniforms, miners with lanterns, children holding hands, none of them solid, all of them shimmering like projections made of sound. At the center, she saw him, Henry Monroe, her father. He looked just as she remembered him the day they buried him, tired, kind, eyes full of sorrow. "Dad?" she whispered. He smiled faintly. "You shouldn't have come here, honey." Tears welled in her eyes. "I had to. You left too many questions." He shook his head. "No, I left you peace, but you dug through it. You were part of this," she said, voice breaking. "You knew about the experiment, about the kids, about the voices. I tried to stop it," he said quietly. "But the Hollow doesn't forget. It takes what it's given, grief, guilt, love, and keeps it talking." She took a step closer. "Then help me shut it down." Henry's face softened. "You can't shut off memory. You can only decide what to remember." The hum deepened, shaking dust from the ceiling. The figures around them flickered violently, distorting into twisted echoes of themselves. "Tell it again," the voices said. Henry turned to them, shouting, "Enough!" The sound that followed cracked the air like lightning. The entire room pulsed bright white. When Rachel opened her eyes, her father was gone again. Only one of the microphones remained lit, its wire glowing faintly red. Dr. Ellen Whitaker's voice broke through Rachel's earpiece. "Rachel, can you hear me? We're picking up seismic interference from your coordinates." Rachel gasped in relief. "Ellen, I'm underground near a large chamber, Project Bellwell. There's machinery down here. It's alive." Whitaker hesitated. "Alive?" "It's reacting to sound." "To me." Whitaker's tone changed scientific, but trembling. "That would align with what we found in the Signal Corps records. They tested resonance fields on buried salt caverns. The waves created an echo feedback loop that amplified emotional frequencies, fear, grief, pain." Rachel's breath quickened. "You're saying this place feeds on emotion?" "In a way," Whitaker said. "It records it, then replays it, over and over, like a living archive." Rachel looked around the chamber, the toys, the chairs, the microphones. "Then those kids, they were caught in the loop," Whitaker said softly, frozen between sound and silence. Rachel pressed a hand against the cold console. "Then I can't leave them here." "Rachel, listen to me," Whitaker warned. "If you become part of that field, it will absorb you too. You'll fade until you're just another voice in the static." Rachel's lips trembled. "Someone has to end it." She switched off her comm before Whitaker could stop her. She crossed the room to the console again. One lever remained untouched, painted yellow, labeled in faded black. "Emergency purge, acoustic reset." Her father's handwriting marked beside it, only in silence. Rachel wrapped her fingers around the lever. "All right, Dad," she whispered. "Then let's make it quiet." She pulled. The hum exploded into a roar. Every microphone burst to life, every speaker trembling with the cries of hundreds of voices. The lights went wild, flickering faster and faster. She dropped to her knees, covering her ears as the chamber filled with sound, children screaming, men shouting, her own voice echoing back at her in loops. "Don't dig. Don't dig. Don't dig." Rachel screamed, "Stop!" And the sound cut out like someone flipped a switch. Silence fell again, complete, heavy, unnatural. For the first time since she'd entered, the chamber was truly quiet. Her flashlight flickered once more and died. In that stillness, a single voice spoke, not through the speakers, not through the air, but from inside her own mind. "Thank you." Rachel felt warmth spread through her chest. The figures around the room dissolved into mist. The toys fell still. Then, one by one, the microphones dimmed. The hum faded to nothing. She looked down at the floor, where the salt dust was rearranging itself, forming words. "Leave. It's done." Her body trembled with exhaustion. She stumbled toward the sealed door. The metal, once fused shut, now hung open, cold air rushing in. Rachel climbed through, scraping her palms on the rock. The tunnel behind her began to collapse, sealing itself in a slow avalanche of dust. She crawled upward until she saw daylight, a thin line cutting through the earth. When she broke the surface, the rain had stopped. Dawn was breaking over Ashford Hollow, soft and gold, as if the world had exhaled after a long nightmare. She lay on the wet ground, gasping, staring at the sky. The air was silent. No hum, no chime, no whispers, just birdsong. Her radio crackled once. "Rachel? Rachel, it's Whitaker. Are you alive?" Rachel smiled faintly. "Barely. But yeah, it's over." God," Whitaker breathed. "The readings are gone. The frequency collapsed." Rachel sat up, wincing. "What about Avery?" Whitaker hesitated. "We never found him." Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "He said it was memory. Maybe he's part of it now." "Come home," Whitaker said gently. "You've done enough." Rachel stood slowly, mud dripping from her uniform. In the distance, the sun rose over the hills, lighting the quiet town below. She whispered to the wind, "Rest now, Dad." Ample. Then, faintly, almost too soft to believe, a single chime rang through the morning air. Ding. Rachel froze. Her father's voice drifted on the breeze, distant but warm. "Some memories don't fade, sweetheart. They just wait to be told again." By the time Rachel Monroe made it back to Ashford Hollow, the town looked half awake and half haunted. The storm had finally passed, leaving puddles that reflected the morning sun like shards of broken glass. The air was too quiet. No humming, no echo, just the brittle sound of a place that didn't quite believe the silence was real. Rachel parked in front of the sheriff's office, her uniform caked with mud, her eyes hollow. Inside, Dr. Ellen Whitaker was waiting, a thermos of coffee in one hand, a map of seismic readings spread across the desk. Whitaker's first words were soft, almost afraid to disturb the stillness. "You made it out." Rachel sank into the chair opposite her. "Barely. You shut it down." "I didn't shut it down," Rachel said quietly. "I gave it peace." The older woman studied her for a long moment. "There's something you should see." She turned the laptop toward Rachel. The screen displayed a frequency graph flat for the first time in weeks until one spike appeared at dawn, 4 sharp beats. Rachel's stomach tightened. 4 chimes. Whitaker nodded. Just one burst. Then nothing. "Maybe it was saying goodbye. Or maybe it was saying it's not over," Whitaker said. The two women sat in silence, the weight of those words stretching thin between them. Finally, Rachel whispered, "If you'd been there, you'd have heard it." The voices, they weren't angry. They were tired, like people waiting too long to be remembered. Whitaker rubbed her temples. "You realize how impossible that sounds?" Rachel gave a weary smile. Impossible doesn't mean untrue. Later that afternoon, Whitaker insisted Rachel rest, but Rachel couldn't. The town was too still, too brittle. She walked through Main Street, watching sunlight glint off the diner windows. People nodded at her, murmured, "Glad you're back," but their eyes skittered away. Ashford Hollow had learned long ago not to ask questions it didn't want answered. She passed the old church, the one whose bells hadn't rung in decades, and stopped. The bell tower was gone, but the base remained, cracked and blackened. For a heartbeat, she thought she heard faint laughter, but it was only the wind whistling through broken glass. Inside, the air smelled of dust and mildew. A few pews remained upright, hymnals scattered across the floor like fallen birds. Rachel knelt near the altar. Her fingers brushed something lodged between the boards, a cassette tape wrapped in brittle plastic. Her breath caught when she saw the label, "For Rachel, the 16th of July 1995. She sat down right there in the dust, her pulse pounding, and slid it into her portable recorder. Her father's voice came through, warm and alive, like he was sitting right beside her. "If you're hearing this, kiddo, then I didn't make it back. I'm sorry for that. But I need you to know something. None of this was your fault. Not the well, not the hollow, not me." He paused, the faint creak of his chair audible in the background. "I used to think evil was noise, chaos, confusion. But I learned that real evil is silence, the kind that comes when nobody's willing to remember. Promise me, Rachel, you'll remember." Her vision blurred with tears. "If they ever find me, let me stay where I am. I'll keep watch from the quiet. Love you, sweetheart." The tape ended with the faint sound of a bell. 4 rings. Rachel pressed the recorder to her chest, sobbing quietly. "Love you too, Dad." That night, she couldn't sleep. The silence outside had a weight to it, thick and waiting. She stared at the ceiling fan, turning slowly, shadows slicing across her face. At 2:14 a.m., her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Deputy Monroe?" The voice was young, trembling. "Who's this?" "This is Jules Hartman, from Forensics. You told me to analyze that box we found in the creek, remember?" Rachel sat up. "Yeah. What about it?" "I ran a resonance test on the wood in the notebook. There's something weird. The ink has trace metallic compounds, like it absorbed vibration over time. When we amplified the signal..." He stopped. "What happened, Jules?" A long pause. Then whispering, "It started talking." Rachel's blood ran cold. "Talking? I recorded it. I'll send you the file." The line went dead before she could reply. Seconds later, a message came through. An audio clip. Rachel pressed play. At first, only static. Then, faint but unmistakable, a child's voice whispering through the distortion. "Rachel, it's not finished." Her hands shook. By morning, she was back at the lab in Charleston. Jules was waiting in the doorway, pale, eyes rimmed red from no sleep. He pulled her into the soundproof testing room. "Listen to this." He played the clip again through high-resolution speakers. The whisper was clearer, now layered, multi-dimensional, almost melodic. "It's not finished. The story hums." Rachel's pulse raced. "That's one of the Carter kids' voices. Lily." Jules nodded. "I checked the spectrogram. The waveform pattern matches your father's last tape exactly. It's the same frequency." Whitaker burst through the door, holding a folder of printouts. "I ran the math. The pattern reappears every 11 hours, in perfect intervals. It's spreading across the regional communication network power lines, radio towers, even phone signals. The hollow isn't underground anymore. It's in the air." Rachel's mind reeled. "It's alive, through transmission." Whitaker's voice trembled. "The only reason it stopped humming before was because you were down there absorbing it, grounding it. But now it's looking for another frequency, another voice." Rachel looked from one to the other. "Me." Jules swallowed hard. "If you don't answer, it'll find someone else." The words hung in the sterile air like smoke. Rachel took a slow breath. "Then we answer it on our terms." They set up in the acoustic chamber thick glass walls lined with soundproof foam. Whitaker calibrated the frequency generator while Jules patched Rachel's recorder into the amplifier. Rachel sat in front of the microphone, the copper bell from the box resting on the table beside her. Whitaker's voice crackled through the intercom. "You don't have to do this." "Yes," Rachel said, steady now. "I do." The lights dimmed. The speakers hummed. Rachel leaned toward the microphone and whispered, "Ashford Hollow. I'm listening." At first, nothing. Then, slowly, the hum returned faint, familiar, pulsing like breath. "Rachel Monroe," the voice murmured, layered in tones human and not. "You remember us." "I do." "Then finish it." Rachel swallowed hard. "You want the story told?" "Fine. Here it is." She began to speak calm, measured, her voice filling the chamber. She told the story of the town, of the mine, of the children, of her father. She spoke their names one by one, giving each of them a moment of silence after. When she finished, the hum changed. Softer now, almost gentle. "Now it remembers you," the voice whispered, "and we can rest." Then came a final sound, 4 perfect chimes, and the waveform on the monitor flattened. Silence. Jules exhaled shakily. "It's gone." Whitaker's eyes filled with tears. "You gave them what they wanted, to be heard." Rachel smiled faintly. "Sometimes the dead don't want revenge. They just want someone to listen." Hours later, as dawn broke again over Charleston, Rachel walked outside, the copper bell clutched in her hand. The sky was pale blue, the city waking quietly. She held the bell up to her ear, half expecting to hear something. Nothing, just the faint whisper of morning wind. She smiled, set the bell down on the courthouse steps, and whispered, "Rest now." Then, as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed once more. A message from an unknown number. Only 4 words. "It never forgets, Rachel." She stared at the screen, heart pounding. A moment later, from somewhere deep in the city, far from Ashford Hollow, came the faint, distant sound of a bell. Ding, 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 ding. The sound of that bell followed Rachel Monroe all the way back to Washington, D.C. It had been 3 months since Ashford Hollow went quiet. 3 months since the hum disappeared from every radio, cable, and power line across West Virginia. To the rest of the world, it was just another strange footnote in a forgotten mining town. But to Rachel, silence no longer meant peace. Silence meant the story wasn't done yet. She had taken a temporary post with the National Archives, cataloging evidence from closed investigations. Her days were orderly scanning reports, sealing boxes, typing notes into cold government databases. But every time she passed a storage vault, she swore she could feel the air move like someone whispering just out of range. That morning, a clerk dropped a new box onto her desk. The label read, "Ashford file number H1195. Rachel froze. "Who authorized this transfer?" The clerk shrugged. "Came in overnight from Charleston. Chain of custody says you're the assigned handler." Inside was her father's recorder, a stack of tapes, and one new envelope marked in red, "Open only in silence." Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. The letter inside was typed on yellowed paper, the kind used for classified communications. Project Bellwell Final Field Report, unfiled. The 17th of July, 1949. The resonance chamber succeeded beyond expectation. The sound did not merely echo, it remembered. The human voice left behind a trace that continued long after the source had ceased. "We advise immediate cessation of testing. The phenomenon appears sentient." Rachel leaned back, the room spinning slowly. It wasn't her father's voice that had started this. It had been there for generations before him, before the mine, before the town itself. The phone on her desk buzzed, snapping her out of the trance. Unknown caller again. She let it ring once. Twice. On the 3rd chime, she answered. A woman's voice spoke softly. "Deputy Monroe?" Rachel froze. "Who is this?" "This is Elena Carter," the woman said. "You don't know me, but my grandmother was June Carter, one of the missing children." Rachel's breath caught. June, she would be gone, Elena said. "But I found something of hers when we were cleaning out her old attic in Ohio. It's a recording. It's not just a voice." Rachel's pulse quickened. "You need to bring it to me. Don't play it." There was a pause on the line. Then Elena whispered, "Too late." A faint hum bled through the speaker, soft at first, then steady. 4 beats. Rachel slammed the receiver down. The lights in the archive flickered once, twice, then silence again. An hour later, Elena Carter stood at the security desk, clutching a small digital recorder. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. "I didn't know who else to call," she said. Rachel guided her into a private room deep in the basement, walls lined with steel shelves. "Tell me what happened." Elena set the recorder on the table. "I found this in a box of my grandmother's things. When I pressed play, I heard a voice say my name. My name. She couldn't have known me. She died before I was born." Rachel reached across the table. "Let me handle it." She hit play. Static, then a child's laugh, then a girl's voice, clear and heartbreakingly alive. "Elena, tell her we're not gone." Elena's hands flew to her mouth. "That's her." The hum began, faint and rhythmic, spreading through the fluorescent lights. Rachel turned off the player, but the sound didn't stop. She whispered, "It found another frequency." Back in the control room, Rachel pulled the circuit breakers for the entire floor. The lights went dark, plunging them into dim emergency glow. Still, the hum continued vibrating through the concrete, steady as a heartbeat. Elena trembled. "What do we do?" Rachel's mind raced. "If this thing survives through memory, through being heard, then maybe we fight it by changing the story, not silence truth." She turned the recorder back on. "You want to talk? Fine. Let's talk." The hum deepened, filling the air. Then came her father's voice, calm, almost gentle. "Rachel, it's time." She blinked back tears. "Time for what?" "For the story to belong to someone else." Elena looked at her, terrified. "He's talking to you." Rachel shook her head slowly. "No, he's talking to you." The hum surged, rattling the shelves. Papers flew from their boxes, swirling in the air like ghosts set free. Elena reached for the recorder, voice trembling. "Grandma June, is it you?" The child's voice replied, soft and certain. "Finish what she started." Rachel nodded. "Say it, Elena. Say what needs to be remembered." Elena took a deep breath, eyes glistening. 4 children went missing in 1995, but they were never truly gone. They became the echo. They became the warning. The hum softened, wrapping around her words like wind through trees. Rachel whispered, "You're changing the pattern." Elena's tears spilled over. "Then let it end with me." She pressed stop on the recorder. The hum stuttered, then faded to nothing. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was whole. 3 days later, the National Archives sealed the entire sublevel. The incident was logged as a seismic malfunction. No one outside the department ever knew what really happened. Rachel filed her final report under Historical Resonance Phenomenon, closed. Elena left Washington the next day, carrying only a small box containing her grandmother's photo and the now-dead recorder. Before she boarded her train, Rachel met her at the station. "You did it," Rachel said softly. "You gave them peace." Elena shook her head. "No, we did. But tell me something, does it ever stop calling you?" Rachel looked toward the departing train, the hum of its engine merging with the wind. "No, it just gets quieter." Elena nodded, clutching the photo to her chest. "Then I'll keep it quiet." She boarded, disappearing into the blur of morning travelers. That night, Rachel returned to her apartment overlooking the Potomac. The city lights shimmered on the water, endless and indifferent. She poured herself a glass of whiskey and turned on the old radio her father had restored decades ago. Static, then faint jazz. She smiled faintly, letting the warmth spread through her chest. But as she turned the dial, the static shifted an old familiar rhythm beneath the music. Ding, 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 ding. Her smile faded. "You never really leave, do you?" The voice that answered wasn't frightening this time. It was her father's, gentle and proud. "No, sweetheart, we just wait for someone to listen." Rachel closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Then I'll keep listening," she whispered, "but I won't let it haunt us anymore." The radio grew quiet again. Outside, the city lights flickered once, as if nodding in agreement. Weeks later, deep in the archives, a technician logged a new entry. Audio file #417, the Ashford Hollow collection. He pressed play to check the transfer. At first only static. Then Rachel's calm, steady voice. "My name is Rachel Monroe. This is the story of Ashford Hollow, the place where sound learned to remember." The hum returned faintly in the background, rhythmic and soft, not menacing but steady, like a heartbeat. And somewhere far away, carried on the quiet wind of an early American spring, 4 bells rang and faded into peace. At its core, the echo beneath Ashford Hollow is not merely a supernatural thriller about sound and memory. It is a meditation on what it means to listen, to remember, and to heal. The story reminds us that silence can be as powerful as noise, that what we bury, whether pain or truth, never truly disappears. It lingers beneath the surface, waiting for someone brave enough to face it. Through Rachel Monroe's journey into the haunted depths of her town and her own lineage, we are shown that confronting the past is not an act of destruction, but of redemption. Ashford Hollow becomes a mirror for all forgotten places, small towns, broken families, and quiet hearts where the echoes of guilt and grief still hum in invisible ways. The story teaches us that memory, even when painful, is sacred. When we deny it, it festers. When we face it, it transforms into understanding. Rachel's decision to listen instead of silence, the hollow becomes a powerful symbol of empathy. The idea that every story, even one filled with sorrow, deserves to be heard. In a world overwhelmed by noise and distraction, this story urges us to slow down and truly hear not only others but also ourselves. It speaks to forgiveness across generations, the unbreakable bond between parent and child, and the quiet courage of those who carry the weight of truth. Ultimately, the lesson of Ashford Hollow is that healing does not come from forgetting, but from remembering with grace. When we choose to listen to history, to pain, to one another, we turn haunting into harmony and silence into peace. The echoes, finally, become our teachers.